I'm Andrew Ohm. For my Veterans History project at the Library of Congress, I interviewed my grandfather, James Beall, a naval officer born on February 24, 1945. He served in Vietnam in the Navy, and his highest rank achieved was lieutenant. This interview was conducted in Caledonia, Michigan.
All right, can you talk about where and when you were born?
I was born in 1945 near the end of World War II in Detroit, Michigan, where I stayed till after high school, and then I went to Michigan State University. I started in 1962. I got my first degree in 1966, which was in the middle of the Vietnam War, and most of my friends were all being drafted and stuff. So instead, I joined the Navy as an officer. I got to go to school 2 more years, so I got 2 more degrees, which is one way that the Navy helped me. And so when I got out, I proceeded to Newport, Rhode Island for 4 months of officer training. And then I graduated from there, became a lieutenant in the United States Navy, where I proceeded to be sent to Patuxent River, Maryland, which is a Naval Air Station near Washington, D.C., for additional training.
All right. Can you talk about your family's reactions to all this?
My older brother and my younger brother, my older brother, his way out of the draft was getting married. They weren't taking married people then. My younger brother, the war ended before he got drafted. So my cousin though, who I spent 4 years in college with, he also joined the Navy as an officer, and he stayed in the Navy for almost 35 years as a flyer. And which was one of the reasons why I kind of picked the Navy, because he was in it and it seemed good as any service that I could think of.
All right. So can you talk about your experiences doing this?
My experiences, although I never went into combat, the first 2 years of my 3.5-year obligation to them was they sent me to Point Mugu, California. It's right at the end of Malibu Beach, so it's kind of nice. And it's a Naval Air Station where we were first learning how to shoot missiles that would knock down aircraft, and they developed it all at that thing there. I was in charge of numerous things. My better jobs were the officer quarters, the bachelor officer quarters, the golf course, but I had a number of other related jobs. I was the classification officer and the destruction of classified material. I had the same clearance as the President of the United States, and they would give me stuff they were doing, that were being declassified, and we would have a kind of a furnace thing that we would burn papers in and stuff. So that was one of the many jobs. I stood duty twice a week, which means the base was under my command. We had about maybe 500 different type of Navy personnel on our base. My regular duties, I probably had 100 enlisted guys that worked for me, and we did everything in our area. We had a lot of not forest fires, but they'd be grass fires in California. We would be, when there was a bad one, we would go out with our maybe 80 guys and help the guys that were trying to fight the fire. Also, we had one airplane crash out of LAX, the Los Angeles airport, and I took our ship out, which was about a 140-foot ship, and we picked up parts that were blown up in the thing, and also body parts, which was not too pleasant, but that's what we did for a week. And then brought everything back, and we give them to the Naval Aviation commission, and they send them to people to be analyzed and stuff.
So was it hard to adapt to this?
Well, one of the first adaptions I kind of remember, and kind of a funny story, is I've always had my hair short. Now it's because there's no hair, but I always had a brush cut in high school and grade school and stuff. So when I went in the Navy, right then long hair was kind of popular, as you can remember from people that were protesting the Vietnam War and stuff. So the first thing they do is take you to the barber before you get your uniform or anything, and they basically give you a haircut that's about a 1/4 inch all over your head. So these guys with long hair, I remember college graduates, long hair, they're getting their head shaved, and basically they were crying like 3-year-old kids, because apparently it didn't like losing their hair. It didn't bother me because my hair was short anyway. So, but adapting is totally different. They spend a lot of time actually breaking you down from being an individual to being more of a team. We're all going to do the same thing the same way at the same time. And you kind of start forming a team. You know, you do that through athletics, you do it through your physical training, you do it through the school training that they give you and stuff, and pretty soon your company becomes a team, and you can definitely feel it. So everybody's kind of in the same situation. It doesn't matter what kind of background you came from, we're all put in the same situation.
All right. So, during this time, obviously, you didn't witness combat, but there were protests and stuff. Did you see this a lot around California? Or?
Right, California was a big protest area. So when we would go down to Los Angeles and stuff, we're basically required to, as an officer, to keep wearing your uniform. So, you know, a lot of people would go down there, officers would go down there and then take their uniforms off and, you know, just wear regular civilians, and then they wouldn't. Others of us would wear our uniforms, and, you know, people would say a lot of negative things and stuff about you, which doesn't make you very happy, but at the same time, you keep saying to yourself, you know, I'm here so you can be free and don't have to go, so I don't know why you're protesting me. But so it was kind of a bad thing when I got out of the Navy and went back home. I landed at Detroit Airport in 1970, which was kind of the winding down of Vietnam. And when I came through the airport, I had to have my uniform on because I flew as a Navy personnel. And so when I came in the airport, there was a lot of people that were throwing, nothing hard, but paper balls at us and yelling at us that we were killing people and this and that. So it doesn't make you too happy. You served your country and you have that kind of negative connotation about it.
So during this time, how did you stay in touch with your family and friends?
It's not easy because they keep you busy. When you're an officer, you're basically can be on duty 24 hours, 7 days a week, even though you can't stay awake that long. But that's why you see so many people drink coffee just all the time, because they're required to be at ready at any time they be called to do something. So it's hard to communicate from the base with anybody. You can send letters. We didn't have emails. We did not have any, cell phones or anything. So it was pretty much by letter, occasionally a phone call and stuff. But they had maybe 2 or 3 phones you could use, and there was always like maybe 30 guys in line at any one time to get a phone. So I just kind of didn't make much contact.
So obviously we're talking about the protests of the Vietnam War. Do you remember any other types of protests? Because obviously this is when the civil rights movement was kind of petering out. Do you remember anything else?
Not really, because in 1968, the Detroit riots were. That's just when I was going into the Navy, and then kind of Vietnam picked up, and by 1970 it started winding down. Actually, in '68, a lot of people thought the war in Vietnam had ended, but then they had the Tet Offensive. A Tet is a religious day that they have over there, or a week they have, and the Viet Cong infiltrated our lines and stuff, and it kind of started up, the bombing started and stuff. So at that point in time, it really got going pretty good. So in 1970, it started winding down again. That kind of took over for the civil rights thing. And in 1970, I got out a year early. I was being sent to, my next duty was going to be on a ship out of Los Angeles Harbor, but it was a World War II ship, and they moved it from its mooring docks, and the thing sank. So then they didn't really know what to do with me, and a huge order was coming because we had a lot of people that wanted to fly who never made it as flyers. They were then let go from flying, but had to serve as crew chiefs for mechanics and stuff. So the Navy started winding down a little bit, and they were going to let everybody go, and unless you hadn't served your time at sea. So I was not planning on leaving, but as I mentioned, we didn't have a lot of, we call them telexes then. They were kind of like electronic typewriters that could be put on a phone, and therefore kind of like a computer, go there and type it out. So when you're an officer by an act of Congress. The Congress actually has to pass, and they put your names in a congressional thing and make you an officer. Same way as when you get out, okay, you have to be decommissioned by Congress. So all these guys were waiting around for their names because we were a Naval Air Station, so a lot of them thought they were going to get out. But my name was the first one that came on the list, which made all of them quite angry, but a lot of them also got out of the Navy. So I got out a year early.
Okay. So when you got home, how was readjustment?
Well, like I said, when I first got home, other guys were with me, and we came through the airport, and people are yelling and bad stuff at us and throwing stuff at us. Kind of gives you a negative connotation. Because I got out early, I had no job set up or anything, so I came home and didn't know anybody, hadn't been in Michigan for 3 years. So it was kind of difficult readjusting to it, but I got some breaks and I got a job and moved on from there.
And where did you work?
My first job, the reason I got that special training in the Navy and then got sent to Point Mugu, and I was head of the officer quarters because I graduated from Michigan State in hotel and restaurant management as one of my degrees. And when I got out, I worked in Roseville, Michigan at Georgian Inn, which is a very large catering hotel. And the guy that ran the place was a Michigan State graduate, and he decided to give me a chance to come in and do something, so that's kind of how I got it.
All right. So over the years, have you been in contact with anyone from your time in service?
No, I haven't, because when I graduated from that school, everybody, I think we had 400 officers graduate during the month that I graduated, and I kept contact while we were still in the Navy, but a lot of them just got sent to wide places, and we were all from all around the country. And so I really didn't make contact again, other than my cousin who lives here in Michigan, and I stayed near him.
All right. So did you learn any lessons?
Well, one lesson you can learn that even though the armed forces do things in very strange ways, most people, every time they do something, you think, why are we doing this? Why this doesn't make sense? But when you look at the overall picture of what they're trying to accomplish, it turns out to be a large team, a bigger team than you know about. You have your small team, but a bigger team. So I've always been a sports guy and a team guy, but in the businesses I've owned and run since that time, I've learned teamwork works much better than everybody being an individual.
All right, and if you could say one thing to people my age, what would you say?
You know, I still think that for a lot of kids, the armed forces is a good way to learn specialized training. It's a good way to, become part of a team. I'm not sure everybody is built to be there for 30 years, but I think it does have a lot of good lessons. At one time we had the Peace Corps, where you could go to the Peace Corps instead of being drafted. We've kind of ended that, but I do think at some point in time, I think you're going to see where, like other nations, you're going to spend 2 years in the service doing something, because there's a lot of guys that are willing to fight and are trained to fight, but it takes, for every one guy that fights, I think it takes 6 people behind them to get you there, get the equipment you need there, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of those jobs could be filled by people that are trying to learn something for 2 years. So I think it's a good organization, and I recommend it to every graduating high school person. If you want a gap year, do that as your gap year.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah.